Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Leaders Voices Project, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Jarvis, an experienced food professional and innovator. Martin works with innovators around the globe, particularly in the Far East and the US, and we're going to talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted his business. But Martin, first of all, delighted to have you with us. So yeah, let's get into the lockdown story. What impact did lockdown have on you and your organization, on your company?
So a lot of my clients require me to travel, and clearly that was constrained. So a lot of projects were, if not cancelled, at least put on hold. We had to pivot in terms of how we operated, and to change deadlines and extended deadlines and moved them. And it really, that in itself required innovation. There's lots of talk now about how audits are being performed, by Skype and by Zoom. And in that way, I had to use that medium a lot more. Whereas in the past, I would have attended site and actually gone and met the factory or client and actually gone onto the site and looked at the process. So it's required a lot more innovation, at least in terms of how we approach that. But the other thing that lockdown brought about was there was a slight reduction in business, and it gave me time to do a course. So I did a course at Oxford Side Business School called Strategic Innovation. And it was really an epiphany, simply because there was no one else who was from a food background there. They were all non-profit organizations and so on. So it gave me a really nice perspective on the innovation world and what other people's view of innovation was. And that's very different to my experience of the food industry and what they believe innovation is. So it was quite interesting from that perspective.
What I love about your story, Martin, is how, two things happen. One is, like many of us working in all sectors, we saw business go down a little bit, which gives us a bit more time. But the other thing we saw was that we didn't have to spend so long on planes. We didn't have to spend so long in meetings, because there's something about digital communication that's more focused and more direct. So again, you gained more time. But what you did was you thought, well, I'm going to do something with that time. I'm going to do something to enrich me, to add value to me, and potentially add value to my business. There's really, for me, there's almost a principle in that around actually thinking, what can I do with what I now have? When something that you valued before gets taken away, i.e. traveling around, what can I do now to make the most of this? And you did that, and I really liked that. But let's think about the innovation side of things again. So you went on this course, you opened your eyes to lots of opportunities, lots of potential. What learnings and principles did you take from that, and how have they impacted on your thinking going forward?
So as I said, it just really expanded my perception of what innovation was from a very narrow product-based innovation, because a lot of people in the food industry, they produce a great new product, it may be a nice new flavor of X or Y or Z, but it's not really innovation, and it's very copyable. So a lot of the innovation in the food industry isn't, to my mind, true innovation, because it's so copyable. In terms of it's a recipe, and a lot of people, a good chef worth their salt, can copy it within 5 minutes. So it's about assisting businesses to actually think of how they can get that USP, whether even within the product. So are you using an ingredient which can't be easily copied or sourced by your competitors, or are you using a process which can't be easily copied? Everything will be copied in time, sure, but you have to get that 6 months to 12-month lead on your competitors by getting these different USPs. And I think that's what this course showed me, that you need to think differently. It also showed me, as I say, I very much got into the corporate social innovation space, and I think a lot of businesses talk about corporate social responsibility, but I personally never heard of corporate social innovation, and really how it's the nexus of doing good but actually creating great new products. And really, I've really embraced that. I don't want to sort of talk about any sort of confidential stuff, but there's lots of projects that I've done actually now that have actually benefited local communities by giving back. By the same time, they make money for the organization. So there's a quid pro quo, really, which I think a lot of organizations tend to separate innovation and corporate social responsibility, and they're two very distinct things. And I think they should come together more and more, where the global citizen really has an expectation that, you know, the brands that they buy, they absolutely want them to show that they are giving back to the community and to the environment in a transparent way. You know, whether that be from QR codes where you can see exactly where it's been produced, and you know, or giving 5p back from every pack to, you know, and there's lots of companies that do that. I mean, I can think of one specific one is very good in that space, Brewdog. A bit of a shout out to them, how they have developed in the corporate social innovation space, going negative carbon, planting a tree for every, you know, X, Y, and Z. So I just think there's really nice stories, and I, you know, that businesses are doing that, but it's not done enough in the food industry. And I think that's a real opportunity, especially for businesses that I work with at a slightly smaller scale, who perhaps a little bit behind on the innovation curve.
Really interesting point there about the intersection of social responsibility and innovation. And, you know, just my observation on that is actually innovation for me is all about insight into what the end user wants, needs, or desires. And if you take that principle of gathering insight and seeking to walk in your customer's shoes to understand, but then apply that to what does the community need, want, and desire, then actually organizations are going to start doing the right thing for the communities instead of what they think might look good in a press release or what they think is the right thing to do. They actually, in the same way that you develop a new product with the end user in mind, you develop your social innovation with your end user in mind. That's a really interesting observation.
Mm.
So what do you see the future of your sector holding after everything we've been through over the last year, everything you've learned about innovation and the breadth of it and the diversity of opportunities within it? Do you see an uphill struggle to convince your sector? Do you see many opportunities that you're going to seize? What's your take on the future?
I think the biggest challenge that the food industry has is that it works on incredibly tight margins. And we all know that, you know, how a lot of companies have failed, like, you know, the IBM story, in terms of how they just really live by actually, you know, reaping the rewards of their products, and don't invest enough in innovation. And I think that's one of the challenges that the food industry has, you know, because other companies have more ability to plow money into innovation, but a lot of food businesses already are struggling. And then when you ask them to allocate money into R&D and innovation that doesn't have an immediate payback, I think it's a challenge. I think, especially for smaller and medium-sized enterprises that I work with, clearly, you know, the bigger conglomerates, you know, they're more able to do that. But I think it's really about trying to convince businesses to even put a small amount of money aside into doing that, and actually demonstrating to them for every pound they invest, they will get back multiples of that. You know, by consumer engagement, by not just new product innovation, but by increased consumer engagement, increased consumer loyalty, and sort of brand loyalty by consumers. But yeah, no, I mean, it is a challenge, because the food industry, I mean, I'm sure there's others, but there's not many that work on so much tight margins as the food industry does, I think.
Yeah, well, there's a challenge there, which hopefully your experience at Side Business School and your experience in the world of work of your business will help overcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this interview today, Martin. I'm really grateful. And I'm sure people who've watched this will be eager to hear more from you. So link to your LinkedIn profile will be in the description. And whether you work in the food sector or not, I'm sure Martin would be eager to carry on talking about social innovation with anyone who'd like to. So thanks, everyone. Join us again for a future interview, and see you all soon.
Okay, thank you.